Hello, everybody. Good evening and good morning and good afternoon, somewhere out there in the world. This is the Face of a Hero show. Happy Thursday to you all, to all those wonderful people all over the world watching and listening. And I hope you take notes today. We have an amazing guest, and he's here, my true friend, Roger Starks. And so we're making it a day about this new hero. And he's not new, but maybe to you he is. And of course, you guys know that this show comes out every Thursday at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. And of course, last week I was actually on vacation, so there was no show, nor was there Real Talk with E.V.E. But we're going to have some real talk here today, Roger. So be ready for that, right?
Being real is very important.
Hey, you cannot be nothing but real. In this day and age, we must be real because there's so many things out there that you don't even know what's true anymore, right?
Sad, but
it's
true.
It's sad. And you guys know that I always bring someone that's shining. I call them the unsung heroes. They could be running a company, running a nonprofit, or both. And they're doing amazing things in the community. But this young man goes farther than the community as far as local in Indiana, Illinois, the country. He's out in other countries as well. And so we're going to get to hear his story because everybody has a story, why they do what they do, what got them to do what they do to get them to where they are today. And so welcome to the Face of a Hero, Roger.
Well, I'm delighted to be here, and I want to thank you very much for allowing me to share a little time with your audience. That means a lot. It's all about sharing and giving, right?
That's it. Sharing is caring, and it's been a long time coming. We've been talking about scheduling this. But you travel just like I do, and of course, I thank you for just squeezing in some time for this day. I know it's been busy. It's been a productive day.
It has been productive.
Talking about the wonderful things that your company, your nonprofit are doing, and of course, there is a book involved, guys, and I will put it on the comments, the information on how to get this book. And I've known, gosh, Roger, how long have I known you? It's been a while.
I would say
for sure about 15, 17 years, something like that.
I'm closer to about 20, I think. Because,
right? I lose count after 10, guys,
It's been a while.
Because it's been a while. And so as you guys know, and if you don't, I gravitate to what resources out there to help increase the knowledge for a child, help them advance in school, succeed in school, and even adults. Whatever there's a solution, I have to share it with you. I can't keep it to myself. And so I wanted to give this platform today to Roger Stark because you need to know, he is a man to know that he comes a long way to get him to where he is here today. And so I'm going to pass the mic over to Roger Starks. And I know I heard he's a Hoosier out from Indianapolis originally. And then he departed and left to Chicago. But that's okay. They're still close enough. You're here in Indiana now with me. So tell us a little bit about yourself, besides being an original Hoosier rather.
Yeah, born and raised in Indiana, raised by a single mother, which was a very defining thing in my life of being with a single mother. I've often said that there's a special place in heaven for mothers. What mothers go through, and
say that again.
What they have to endure, and there are good men out there. There's no doubt. I don't want to disparage the good men, but there are so many men that are just confused and ill-equipped to be fathers. And being a father encompasses much more than most men think. And if I guess that's a kind of a message I'd like to kind of leave here, because I've written this book about your child learns differently. Now what? Our next book is going to be your students learn differently. Now what? The truth for educators. And that's going to be our next book. But I've also been thinking about a book, how the American father is destroying the American family. Because fathers, first of all, there's no schooling and degree in parenting. And
that's true.
And we don't think about that. And the reality is I give a lot of talks to churches and synagogues and mosques and whatever the case might be. And I'm always talking to parents. And so the first thing I do when I show up, I ask a rhetorical question because everybody knows why I'm there. I'm there to talk about their children. I say, Any parents and anybody having children? Of course, everybody raises their hand. They go crazy.
Right.
You know, their smiles are big and their energy's high. And yes, I said, that's terrific. How many people have a PhD in parenting? And then they all look at me like a deer in headlights. I said, I know what a PhD in parenting is. Mom and dad have whoopee one night, and mom wakes up and she rolls over and says, guess what? We're going to have a baby. And then now every parent is on their mad search of any child they've ever known or any parent they've ever known that they've admired and respected. And because they want to be, everybody does. I don't care about your race, creed, or religion. They want to be the best parent they can be for their child. Because that's what parents want to be. But nobody guides them and nobody directs them. And if you have a child and everything's working properly and they're learning really well, they're in that top third and they understand everything coming at them the way it's being pitched and they process it well and they get great grades, and then you're good. But many times, and today, statistically, 7 out of 10 of our children learn differently.
That's one thing that parents need to take the time. I remember doing a workshop on how your children learn, and it was very informational because even as adults, they don't learn how they learn. They don't know. Are you visual aid learner? Are you auditory learner? I'm a visual aid learner. And so teachers want to force a child to learn the way they want them to learn. So how's that?
Well, as I said, when a child learns differently, a parent really doesn't know what to do. And let me frame it out this way. I think this is the message people should take away from this interview. Is number one, our children, I wasn't expecting on getting it so early, but we're here. Children are our most underutilized asset in the learning and teaching process. Yes, we as individuals, we learn. That's what human beings do. We learn. That's what we're built for, learn. But our capacity for learning is different for each of us.
Yes, indeed.
It's shaped by our environment,
yes, indeed,
our genetics, and our life experiences.
Speaking of life experiences, I'm going to pause you there because I know you went fast forward. Let me take you back. Your childhood, how was that? How were you brought up?
Well, I was brought up in poverty. I was brought up by a single mother that loved me to death and loved her. The big point I want to make about poverty, sometimes people don't have as much clarity as they should about poverty and what goes on in those homes. But I want to be official today. Parents love their children. It doesn't make a difference how much money you have.
That's right.
They love their children the same, and maybe sometimes even more, because when you don't have a lot of money, oftentimes you view your life with that you don't have a lot of blessings. When you have a lot, you're constantly thinking about if you're balanced, you're thinking about your blessings. But when you don't have much, you just don't have a lot of blessings you feel to be grateful for. So when you have a child, that's the greatest blessing of the world. And that's not a prerogative of the rich or the poor. It's a prerogative of human life. And so regardless of where people come from, they love their children.
They truly are.
They love their children. And they want what's best for their children. And oftentimes we forget about that. And I would just say that coming from my mother's, my home and where I came from, I had a mother that loved and believed in her children beyond belief and did everything within her power to help her children have the best opportunity to be the best it can be. And what was interesting, now I happened to do well in school. Things worked for me. I was in the top 2% so everything flowed for me. I had a brother, and we were in the same house, and we happened to have different fathers. School was an enormous struggle for him, matter of fact, if I look back on it, I think perhaps he may have really been on the spectrum, ASD. And my mother loved him as well, but she had really no idea out of just showering him with love and the morals and the values that she continually demonstrated by her own life and how she would preach to us. But she didn't really know how to help him.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, I didn't either at the time. And I wish I'd have known then what I know today. So I just, that's where I come from. I come from a loving, caring mother without a lot of financial support for our family. It was so challenging that I wanted to help. And I had an opportunity to get a paper route. And those, it took a bond. You had to have a bond, $50 bond back in the day to get a paper route.
Wow, I did not know that.
And because you're collecting money every week.
True that.
50 weeks, but I'm sure it's more today than what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And so my dad, I didn't see much in my life, but he popped in every once in a while to say hello or whatever. And he came to my house, a couple of weeks before I was thinking about this. And I said, I really want to try to, because my father never paid support, but I want to try to help my mother. And I talked to guys and I could get a paper route. I can make $7, $8 a week, maybe 10, I don't know.
Wow.
And, but you needed a bond. And so my dad said, you know what? I'll give you your $50 bond. I'll give it to you. I'll be here a week from Saturday. I'll come by and I'm going to give you your $50 and you can go get that and help your mother. So I was really excited about it. He'd really never committed anything to me in my life. And so I was very, very excited about it.
Wow, he was willing to do something finally for you.
Oh my God, it just meant so much. And so that Saturday morning came and my mother and her friends were going to go fishing. And she said, she set me down on the front step of our house in Indianapolis, Indiana. And she said, Roger, I don't want you to be disappointed. I love you. And I'm sure your father does in his way, but I think you really should just come fishing with us. You should come with us. We're going to have a good time. I said, no, Mom. Dad said he's coming. He's going to bring me that $50. And she says, Roger, I loved you and I loved your father. Sometimes I just don't think he's the guy that comes through for a variety of reasons. And I'm not going to try to throw stones at your father, but I don't want you to be disappointed. Right. So why don't you go fishing with me? I said, no, Mom, no. My dad said it to me. He may have said something to you, but he said to me, he's going to be here. So I stayed and they went fishing. And I sat on the porch 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, and no dad. Wow. And we had this big field next to our house. And there was this old 51 Ford I saw across the field, going down this old road. And it looked like my dad's car. And so I jumped up and I started to run across the field. Dad, I'm here. I'm over here, Dad. I'm over here. I'm here. And I tripped and fell. And I fell in a mud puddle. I beat that mud puddle to death. Until I was exhausted. And I just walked back to my house and sat on the porch. And of course, mud was all over me. You can only see my eyes. And by the time my family came home about dusk, it had crusted all over my face. And my mother looked at me. She saw the tears. This is hard for me. I'm sorry.
It's okay. This is your platform, your story to get us to where we are today with you.
So my mother sat down beside me and she said, I'm so sad. She says, I'll tell you what. I've got $10. That's their emergency money. That's all I got, Roger. So all I had was $10. But she said, you know what? We're going to go to that paper station and we're going to take him this $10. And we're going to see what he says. The paper manager. So we go to the paper station. I remember this like yesterday. Started to walk in. And I said, Mom, I want to go in by myself. Please stay here. Let me go. So they had this little cinder block building where they carried papers. And I walked into the paper manager was sitting there and I said, "Sir, I'm here to apply for that paper boy's position. I've heard a lot about you, Roger. You're a nice young man in this community. It'd be an honor to have you serving and selling our papers and servicing our community." But I got down on my knees right in front of his desk. I pulled out $10. I said, "Sir, I know that it's a $50 bond. I don't have $50. I got $10. But sir, if you will trust me and you will take this $10, I promise you one thing. I'll be the best paper boy you ever had." And he just looked at me. A little tear came out of his eyes. And he came around from the paper station. He grabbed me and said, "Son, get up." He said, "I believe you. I believe you." He took my $10 and started out with Indianapolis News. Wow. And at the time in Indiana, they had what they call the Indianapolis Times. And I was on a route on Rule Street, Washington to Michigan. The Times had 85 customers. The News had 12. When I got done, he was out of business. I had every customer on the street. Every customer on the street. And what I did, this is what people don't do. I listened. There's two things. If you want any advice, there's lots of things that makes things successful. But I would say, listen and focus. Listen and focus. And so what I did is I went down to each customer, and before I started delivering my 12 papers, I asked each of my 12 customers, "How did you want the paper delivered to you?" Because boys would just ride down a bike and throw paper.
Right. That's what I've noticed.
And the guy said, one guy, "Well, I want my paper right under the mat, and I want the headline right at the top. That's the way I want my paper." Another customer, "Well, I want my paper in the door." Another customer, "I want my paper. I have a rack up here by my mailbox, and I want my paper." And everybody had their way that they would prefer their paper to be delivered. So what did I do? I listened and I focused. I made sure every customer had their paper just the way they liked it.
Wow. Customer service right there.
That's it. So I did that with every customer. And for long, I had them all. And there was a dress store at the end of the street on Michigan Avenue. There was a little dress store, and behind it, they had a beauty salon. So you could buy jewelry, you could buy dresses, and you could get your hair cut with. And these two ladies at the time seemed elderly, I don't know, but they were so kind to me. When I would come in, they would fix me a piece of cake or cookies or milk. They just were so kind to me. And I told my mother, because we were very poor one time, and I said, "Mom, if I ever get rich, I'll buy you all the $2.98 dresses you can ever wish for." Because that's what dresses cost.
Wow.
I said, "I will buy them."
$2.98.
Yeah.
How long ago was that? I'm sorry. Don't want to put your age out there, Roger.
But it's a long time ago.
$2.98. Wow.
So the rest is in this particular shop were a little more expensive, but they would let me buy presents and give me enormous, and I could put it on layaway.
Wow.
And so I wanted to honor my mother, because she gave so much and nobody had ever given her anything. And so I did that. But that was a defining moment. And what I did is they had what they call a blue streak. There was a later, and I got a blue streak route. And then they had the star, which was the morning. Then I got a star route. So I had a star route, a news route, and a blue streak route. 3 paper routes, 3 of the days. And I would do when you're 10, we used to have these big iron wagons with very heavy. And on Sunday, the paper was very heavy.
Oh,
on
yeah.
Sundays.
I remember.
And they would deliver early on all the ads, and then they put the paper. And we lived up above a bar in this place on Washington Street, and I would go down and to deliver these papers sometimes in the snow would be enormously challenging for a young boy. My mother would help me stack them. I remember putting the string from the cart around my shoulders and neck and crawling down the street to pull these papers to get them to these customers the way they wanted it. And it was such a humbling experience, but it was gratifying because I knew I went in because we couldn't buy the clothes we wanted. And at the time, society was very prejudiced towards women. Mm-hmm. Women couldn't get credit cards, but LS Airs in Indianapolis, they would give charge plates. They would give charge plates to women, could get a charge plate. So my mother got a charge plate. So what we did, we bought clothes for my mother, my brother, and I promised my mother, if we do this, I'll pay for it on every month. So the first thing that came out of my paper route check was at $2.50 every week to ensure we could pay the $10 for my brother, myself, and us to have what we needed to have. And that kind of instilled the value of being focused. And I was a boy that went to church and serving the Lord and serving my family, because that's what a man was supposed to do, is to serve their family. I could go on all day, but that was one of the defining things that kind of set me on my path of being grateful.
Wow. And how young were you being the paper boy?
9, 10, and 11.
Would you let your 9, 10, or 11-year-old do that now? I know there's stories out there that actually, I'm sorry, my phone broke, guys, and I can't turn the phone off or nor the volume. So excuse that sound. Forgive me. Thank you, Roger, for pointing that out. I'm really trying. But, the kids nowadays are going through their own struggle. There is still poverty. Okay. Just as the Bible says, there will be poor among you. Right.
That's absolutely right.
And so I wanted to share your story. I did not know the whole story, guys. So this was not a setup or anything. And it's heartfelt to hear that because there's truth to that still till today, now in 2025, where some of the kids have to make a way to help support the household, especially coming from a family that the mom is on WIC, on food stamps, and she's not as healthy. She can't get a job because some people prefer to do that than to work. Let's keep it real.
Well, my mother was blind in one eye and she was crossed in the other. So she had problems qualifying for work because they want to give you an eye test in factories. And so she worked.
So like she didn't want to work. It's not like there was the food stamps in the WIC as easily accessible back in the day, right? And so we do still have nowadays where teenagers are working.
I don't think there were back in. I don't
think
think
we had that.
What we would do is if someone would come to the house and bring White Castles or something, we made sure we saved something for breakfast, because that was not only going to be our dinner, it was going to be our breakfast
for the next day.
So you didn't eat till you were full. You just ate until you felt comfortable, and
to leave some for the following day. Yeah. I think we can all relate. Either it's your story or your parents' story or your grandparents' story. This was my story too. One of 8 kids. You had only a brother, you said?
That's correct.
And so it was tough to him. It was tough for us. It was tough for his mom. It was tough for my mom. But it's not about me. It's about knowing that there's a struggle, that our kids still go through struggles. And what's worse is the struggle mentally, emotionally, psychologically, right? And so fast forward, when did you say, I have to make a change in someone else's world? What got you to say, this is what I want to do?
That's a fascinating story. And there's a real dynamic to it that really includes my mother again. And what had happened, as you know, I was going to be a minister. I decided not to do that, but I started working in my career, and I was very fortunate. I did well, and I'm starting my own company and worked for other companies, and then eventually started my own company and had a relatively large marketing communications company with offices in 5 cities around the world, 5 countries and a number of cities, and did well, creating interest and arousing desire and stimulating a call to action to develop people's programs and services to make people want to buy what they were selling. And I did really well. But my background was kind of harking at me in the background. And, at some point when you come from poverty, you want clothes, you want certain clothes, you want a certain kind of home, you want to travel, you want certain kind of food, you want a lot of different things. And I had a lot of people over life and time that helped me out. I mean, in a very, very meaningful. I mean, a lot of, because I didn't have a father. So whatever I am as a man, I've kind of made it up as I've gone along. I see a TV show, I see a movie, I met a 2-star general that became a big mentor for me. And I just kind of made it up as I went along. And so as my fortunes began to grow, and it was worth a few million, but not a pill cage, but it's worth a respectable sum of money. I began to feel that calling. I got to do something that makes a difference in a much more meaningful way with those that are greatestly that are challenged and disenfranchised. And I did something that I would never recommend anybody do. I put it out there that I had a little bit of money and I was willing to invest, no guarantees, to change the world. Well, the number I put on at that time is 500,000. Well, everybody and their brother and aunt and uncle come to me. Don't do this. This is not, I'm not recommending you do this. That was a bad play. Everybody, I mean, I had relatives I didn't even know I had. And then finally, a couple of guys walked in and said, what do you know about the brain? And I had a pretty successful marketing communications company. We had clients all over the world, the biggest and the best. I was doing everything. And I said, I don't know. I think I got one. And he said, what if I tell you this concept about where people like to propagate that all women are dumber than all men in math? That's a lie. What is this concept where all whites are smart and all blacks? It's a lie. So let me give you an example. Do you realize why we're on the moon? I hadn't really thought about that. But do you understand it was a black scientific mathematician, a black female, a woman that figured out the formula?
That's right.
If it wasn't for her, we wouldn't be on this room. So she just dispelled intellect, women. It was a lie. That captured my attention.
I bet it did.
So, because I've been around people of color all my life, you know. So at any rate, so we started on our march. I said, I want to understand more of this. And there were a lot of moving parts. Talk a lot about it, but we're not going to get too deep. You wanted to understand who the person is behind this, this
and why.
Remarkable.
Yeah.
Well, one day, my mother wanted to set me down because I had started to invest millions of dollars into this. And my mother said, Roger, I'm a little concerned about you. I said, why is that, Mother? She goes, I think you've forgotten where you came from. I said, well, what makes you think that? She says, well, I think you may care too much. Your care for children and making a change. So I don't think people care that much. Democrats or Republicans, they can talk all they want to talk, but we wouldn't be in the mess we are today with 7 out of 10 of our children learning different, and nothing's happened. Nothing's changed for 150 years. We've never invested a nickel in empowering our children with the ability to be the best they can be. Got a lot of time on spending empowering teachers so they can be the best they can be, and that's good. But the student plays a role. We need to invest in the student as well. Well, historically, nobody's ever done that. They thought that was hooky puck. All teaching and learning comes up through and by the teacher, which is an absolute lie. The student plays a role. At any rate, I said, well, Mom, what do you mean? I forgot. I said, well, you know, it's very difficult. I mean, you've spent a lot of money, and, you know, I'm really concerned, or she was getting older, that you're going to spend all of this money and you're going to be too old to get it back. And I'm not going to be here for you, baby. And I just don't want you to destroy your life, because I don't think you care just too deeply. I looked at her. I said, Mom, let me tell you a story. You remember when we lived up on Central Avenue? Yeah, I was about 5. Yeah. At nighttime, you would bring in a bunch of women after midnight. These were Black women. These were Latino women. These were white women. The only thing they had in common is they were all poor. And at that time, Black and white, they didn't mix. but that didn't deter my mother.
Good.
And she brought them all into the house at midnight. And they would sit and talk about the troubles. You know, I know that today about how men are sexual and like back in the day, we had all these factories everywhere. But the owner of the factory, the guy, a little bit of a, not all, I don't want to, this is not to throw everybody up, but there's so many experiences. You know, they know they have a woman, she's divorced, she's got 3 kids, she has nowhere to go. Hey, honey, you want a little overtime? I know where your overtime is. Take care of Uncle Charlie. Your overtime's solid.
Yeah.
And my mother, I said, I never told you, Mom, but I was sitting at the top of those stairs at this little 5-year-old boy. And I was listening to every conversation you had and the abuse and the disrespect and the challenges. And you stood up and said, are you done? Are you finished with this? Are you over this? And they're like, well, yeah, but what are we going to do? I got my new boyfriend is a Teamsters union guy. Teamsters. And he said, he told me if we're willing to stand up and face reality and to these knuckleheads that were abusing women everywhere, Teamsters will be right behind you.
Wow.
And I heard you talk about that. And I heard you give instructions. When I stand on that factory machine and I get up and I say, shut it down, and don't worry about it. The Teamsters will be outside and they'll protect us. They got our backs. I heard all those comments, Mother.
Wow.
I listened to that. And I remember when we were a little kid going to dinner, we couldn't go to dinner. What they did, they made mother a spy. They would change her name and social security number, and they would plant her in factories all over Indiana. She would go in and be whoever, and boom, boom, boom. You saw the movie, I forget, it was not Norma Jean or whatever it was, Sally Field star. They stood on the, that was my mom.
Wow.
And they went through that, and we'd have to have Teamsters go to dinner. We didn't have fancy places. We'd go to the Waffle House, but we'd have a Teamster union guy there with a baseball bat. Because one night, somebody threw a firebomb through our front window, smashed it, fire came about. And I said, I remember all that, Mom. I remember all that. And I remember you setting me down and say, Roger, I love you with all my heart. I would never do anything to harm you. But at some point, you got to stand up. At some point, you got to stand up for what's right. Because if you don't, people will knock you down and never stop. And I have to stand up. And I love you. And I wouldn't put you. So I was telling her this story. And I listened up to you talk night after night. And she just looked at me in just total amazement that I knew all these things. And I remember these things.
Wow.
And I said, Mama, the fruit does not fall too far from the tree. And I'll never forget that. We hugged, we embraced. I said, I'm going to do everything I can for those children that learn differently because I can. And I didn't happen to have children, so I could risk it all. And I risked it all. I put every dime, every ounce of everything I had to do this, to help children. Because the greatest gift in the world, our most cherished asset, is our children. And if the Democrats aren't going to do anything and the Republicans aren't going to do anything, and they keep looking at things the way they've always looked at them and doing things the way they've always done it and expect something differently, to me, that's insanity. So that was my mother had an enormous outside influence on my life. And, you know, she's passed away today, but my staff, because I have a lot of staff and a lot of people, and they always would, because I can be a little aggressive. I'm an outcome driven guy. I want the right things.
He's a straight shooter. That's for sure.
I would like to think that's the case. And but all they would love to have my mother come to the office because I was extremely very reverent. When my mother would come in, I would take a back seat and bow my head. That was my mother, and I was always.
Much respect.
Always. And she was a tough disciplinarian. Let me tell you, she cracked it.
She had to. Look at you.
Yeah, she
Look
cracked
how you turned out.
Yeah.
You turned out great.
But those things are fundamental things that shaped my life.
So part of your team because you have it scientifically proven.
Everything's signed. Yeah, it's all peer reviewed.
Peer
material.
reviews. You had what kind of doctor on the team for
We-
it to be tested?
We have everything. We have clinical psychologists, occupational therapists, neurologists, speech and language pathologists, clinical psychologists, vision developmental. We've got them all.
Wow. And so when was the birth of this book, and what's your why for this book, besides everything we just heard, if there's anything different?
Well, I think that the big challenge became for us is that I was not involved in education. So this made so much sense to me if we can make it easier for a child to learn, if we can make it easier for a teacher to teach, if we can elevate a child's self-esteem and self-confidence, and that's important, in particular in poverty. People go through things and life beats them up and they beats them down.
Mm-hmm.
I was fortunate because of my religious beliefs and the constant encouragement that I could do whatever I wanted to do and I could be the best. And so I had an outplaced confidence in myself. And things didn't go right. I went into schools and they would spend thousands of dollars preparing to make a teacher a better teacher. But educators wouldn't spend 10 cents on making a student a better student.
In our child.
They wouldn't do it. They wouldn't do
That's
it.
the best investment, you ask
They
me.
wouldn't do it. Oh, for a ride, that's a whole other show in itself.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm out there beating them, and everybody told me I was stupid. They said, Roger, you have this idealistic world that people care about people and people are going to do. And so I went out there and I spent, and it was so much politics. You go into a school district, I'll give you a quick story. We had a school district in Michigan, the first one ever that did our BrainWare, our program district-wide. And they were one of the lowest performing academic districts in the state of Michigan.
Wow.
When we got done, they were the 7th highest performing district in the state of Michigan. They got a letter from the governor, all because of BrainWare. So but then a new superintendent come in. He didn't particularly like the superintendent that was there before him. And he brought me into the office. He said, Roger, I just want to let you know we're terminating our contract with you. And I said, what? I said, we're doing so well. Everything. I mean, look where you're at. He said, Roger, I'm a superintendent. I am not held accountable for outcomes, and neither are our teachers. They have the teachers unions that protect me. I have my board that protects me. We're not accountable for outcomes. And I didn't like that superintendent. He's an SOB. I never liked him. And anything he's doing, I don't want to be associated with. And you're his boy. I said, well, sir, I don't think I was his boy,
Right.
but I was a good vendor or whatever. I don't care. I didn't like him. Therefore, I don't like you. I can do what I want. I'm bringing my people in. You're out. And that's the way education is pretty much. That's why we only have about a third of our kids performing at grade level, because that's their attitude. They don't need to perform.
That's
true.
That is so true.
Our friend Buffett and his guy, I forget the gentleman's name that worked with him forever and ever, but he said, look, if you have any business and you don't structure the incentives and the financial rewards based upon what outcomes you want, you'll never be successful as a business. There is no structure in education to drive outcomes. The only structure in education is to protect teachers and administrators. There is no protection for children, none. And so therefore they don't, and look, and I'm going to be clear, it's not ignorance. These people are, look, they're moral people. They're ethical people. Look, if I was going to start a society tomorrow, I'd probably start it with teachers. Because teachers don't say, hey, I'm going to be a teacher. I'm going to be a billionaire. No. You don't do that. You become a teacher because you want to help people. That's why you become a teacher. You want to help people.
That's the why.
Okay.
Well, at least it should be.
Yeah. They do. And they would do anything they could to help the children that learn. But the system, the system really does not give them the resources to help children. So they're kind of like at the mercy of the leadership. And it's not ignorance. Here's what I would like to say. The greatest obstacle to discovery is not ignorance. It's the illusion of knowledge.
Mm.
And our educators have an illusion of knowledge. You say, well, how could that possibly be? Well, because you don't understand. If you look up the word education in a dictionary, you'll never see the word learning. You're going to see instruction. I'm a big proponent. I say we should change the names of all the Department of Education to the Department of Learning, because that's what they say we're supposed to do. I was talking to a number of different superintendents. I said, what do we do here? What's this about? Well, we're about, there's not one grant on your website about learning, not one. Everything's about teaching.
Right, right.
So at what point is it about learning? Thankfully, in Indiana, we got a governor that understands that. As he said, look, Roger, in all my years of education, when you say the word education, I know this at a local level, a state, and a federal, there's only two words ever mentioned when you say school choice and teaching methodology. It's never talked about, considered, or suggested that how might we tap into the latent learning potential of this student. And he said, this makes profound sense to me. Profound sense to me. So this book, how did I come about? Going to education and getting, because it's all politics. I mean, the superintendent of state education in Indiana said one day, he said, I told superintendent, if you think you're a superintendent, you're an idiot. You're a politician dressed like a superintendent. And that's what you have to recognize. You're never going to be a successful.
Politics,
yeah, it's all politics. So we realized, I said, we got to step away from education because they don't care. They're not willing to listen. They care, but they have a massive illusion of knowledge and they don't want to listen. So I said to myself, we're just talking. Because I'm spending all this money, we're not getting the railroad. We get in, we get out, we get in. Who cares about kids? Who really cares? And we said, parents care. I went back to my child. My mother had nothing, but she cared for me. She would have done anything to help me be the best I could be. And I said, that's not the privy of the rich or the poor. That's the privy of motherhood. Every mother loves, and they'll do anything. We got to start talking to parents. So we put a program together to work with parents and to help empower them with the ability to empower their children to have the best life they can be. Therein lies why we wrote this book. Your child learns differently. The truth for parents, because parents care. And we've had enormous success. We're now in 73 countries in all 50 states, working with parents. Now, it costs a fortune. It'd be a lot more economic for everybody. And we can't reach everybody with the prices that we got to charge an individual parent. The only way we can reach the greatest disenfranchised populations is working through schools. Today they have the only vehicle that has the ability to scale this to everybody. And we understand working with schools, and we're very scalable, very affordable. That's why I said such great admiration for this governor in Indiana. He wants to look at this. Now, he's not endorsing my product. He can't do that. And this is not about the state saying no, that's not what this is about. What they're about is there's about this comprehensive integrated cognitive training. That's what they want to investigate. And there's different companies that do different things, different ways. And it's up to that principal and that superintendent to take the initiative. First of all, to be open and receptive to empowering their children to learn. But they don't have to pick me. They can look at lots of different competitors at different levels. Now, I happen to think we will show very, very well at the end of the day. We've done our homework. You got to realize I come from business. So I've done my homework. So I have no fear of competition, but that's the way the dog has to work. But that's why we wrote this book, was writing this book for parents.
So where can they find this book?
Well, you go to mybrainware.com. You can do two ways. You can go to mybrainware.com, mybrainware.com. You can go there, and the book is there. And it's there are many. Amazon's obviously the number one bookseller, but there's Barnes and Noble. There's a whole bunch that they're all through. But go to mybrainware.com, and there's a tab there. Just click on. You can go investigate it, but going before you buy it, you can investigate and look at it, research it, and see what it might. It's getting rave reviews, and now I said we're getting ready to write a book now about your students learn differently. Now what? The truth for educators, and we're very excited about that.
And this is a question out of the book. Ask yourself and your child's teacher, what is learning? How would you answer the question, what is learning? How do you think most educators would answer? That's a good question. I'm going to start asking my teachers. that question. So typically the answers we hear when we ask the question relate to acquiring new knowledge or skills, being able to do something we couldn't do before, and the like. While those answers are true, it is now how we would answer the question. It is not now how we answer the question. So how would you answer the question, parents, educators? What is learning? And of course, you can jot down on the comments. We'll respond to you after the show. We'll have Mr. Stark respond to the questions as well. And so now there was something that I have the privilege of getting firsthand information from the company, from Mr. Stark, that there is a grant in Indiana, first ever.
Yeah, there's a grant. The grant. I want to make this sure. This grant in Indiana. This is the first governor of any state, and I would argue it's the first leadership position in any government anywhere in the world, in the 220, that has ever stood up and stepped forward and said, hey, we need to investigate what it would look like if we invested in our children, not the teacher, but in our children. This is the first time a government official has come forward and he said, God did not create any junk. And I'm going to tell you a story. So this state has that opportunity, if they choose to. Now it'll be up to each principal and each superintendent to pick the company that they feel will best serve their needs in this comprehensive integrated cognitive training. But I would argue, I want people to understand, not all cognitive training is the same. And you need to understand that. And the brain is a highly comprehensive, integrated, systemic organ. And if you're going to have any substantial physiological change in the brain with demonstrated sustainability and transfer, you must build that brain the way the brain was built to work. So it's this comprehensive, integrated architecture that we use to build cognitive infrastructure, which drives such enormous growth with sustainability and transfer in such a quick period of time. And it's such a great, it's a force multiplier, because not only do you empower the children to learn better and learn easier, but you also have, where schools are implementing it, 50% less disciplinary problems within the classroom. You have lower absenteeism. You have lower tardiness. And there's nothing, I've never seen anything have a greater force multiplier, because once people understand how to learn and think and reason and problem solve, they're going to be better workers. You're going to have better police department. You're going to have less crime. This touches so many aspects, because, and the reason it does, it's touching at the root. All of the things that I see operating in schools and in the government, they're all dealing with surface issues. They're all dealing with symptoms. Very few people address the root cause of a problem. For sure. And what we have the ability to do, and what this science has, is to unpack the learning and teaching, so you can get at the root cause as to why something is the way it is. And then you have a better opportunity, when you understand what the cause is, to remediate in mainstream. And that's what this is really about. It's really about empowering a parent, or empowering a teacher, or empowering a school administrator with the best opportunity for them to empower their children to have the best opportunity for them to be themselves. And there's one message I would like to leave today. I know we're probably getting close to the end, right?
We had about a couple of minutes, 6-7 minutes.
Well, the big thing I would like to make sure people walk away with this discussion today is, we all readily acknowledge we're all shaped by our environment and our genetics and our life experiences. And historically, educators have always thought that's the way it is. We've all been in school. Haven't you been in school? Everybody thought there were certain kids. Well, that's the dumb kid, right? That's the kid that talks too much. That's the kid that's lazy. That's the kid that doesn't pay attention. That's the can't sit still. Or that's the kid that has lousy parents. And that's the excuse. Oh, it's all about the parent. That every educator ties to the challenge and the problems of the children that don't learn and perform grade work level proficiently at grade level. And I'm here to say it's a lie. The reality is this, and we know this today with the science. Each of us, you, me, you, are the CEO of E.V.E.
That's right.
And if we want different, we can have different. but we got to do different.
Come on.
Because let me tell you, God did not create any junk.
No, he didn't.
God did not create. There's a special little
I am
person.
wonderfully made. So
There's a
good.
wonderful little person, special little person, just trying to figure out how to step into their best selves. And because what do children want to do? They want to please their parents. And they wonder, and when they don't learn and don't get it the way everybody, and about 9 or 10, they start to realize they see their peers and it doesn't work. I work as hard as they work. I do as much as they do, and it still doesn't work. There's hope for each of us because God did not create any junk. He didn't start with any child you've ever met. He didn't start any child you're going to meet in the future. And I'm going to tell you this, people, he didn't start with your child.
That's right.
There's a special little person inside every little person just striving to figure out how they can step into their best self. But the sad thing is parents have no idea how to empower their child with the best opportunity to step into their best self. And the sad thing is also, neither do educators. Educators have no idea. People don't understand. Educators go to school, they learn how to teach. They don't teach them anything about learning. If you have an educator who knows anything about learning, they've studied it on their own. And many have. But they don't teach them how students learn to teach. They don't teach them how to teach. Teach more, teach less. BrainWare, school's all about the teaching and the what. BrainWare is about the learning and the how. So within these children, a parent can't do it and a teacher can't do it. But that's exactly what BrainWare can do. We can empower that child with the best opportunity for them to step into their best selves. And I just want to say this. We provide hope where there's no hope. We provide opportunity where there's no opportunity. And do not give up on your child. It is the greatest single gift you'll ever have is having birth. And the second greatest gift you can ever give your child is to do BrainWare.
Yeah, have a good education if you know what that means nowadays. The education system, and I'm reading from the back of the book real quick, the education system isn't solving this problem. The cavalry isn't coming, and your child isn't going to outgrow these difficulties. In fact, what you don't know could be keeping your child from succeeding at school. Now what? We'd be asking, right? It doesn't have to be that way. In spite of what we were led to believe, intelligence isn't fixed and can improve. At the core of learning are mental processes called cognitive skills, which are how our brains learn. It's that how of learning and not the what of teaching that matters. By understanding the science of learning, how can you help your child turn on their learning superpowers? How? But you're also offering through all of this, and mind you, this is under a grant here to the state of Indiana. If you're an educator,
there's an opportunity, yes.
Get with him. You see the website, you can easily contact them, but you also have YouTube, you have a podcast. The website has so many free services. Tell us real quick in the next couple minutes what that offers.
Well, there's a lot of free services on the website. First, there's an enormous resource base of knowledge of how your child learns that will empower you to be a much better parent as it relates to working with your child's intellectual and emotional well-being. We have a free cognitive assessment on there that will really give you great insights about the first questions you want to ask if you think there's something afoot that things aren't working. And then we have a book called Your IQ plus Your EQ equals your UQ, and that's a free booklet as well. So there's a number of free things on the website that you can avail yourself to, and there's always an opportunity if you choose to want to have a learning and development call. We have a ton of people standing aside to take those calls and service parents and providing hope where there's no hope and opportunity where there's been no opportunities. And I would just say one thing. There's only one difference between a winner and a loser. One quits. Your parent, never, never, never give up. Yes. There is hope and there is an opportunity. The only challenge is you have to decide whether you want to take it.
That's it. Everything is done by choice. And so you heard his story. You heard where he came from. It's not like he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. What he was growing up with, what he was going through, led him to be that fire, that push to say, I can't continue to live like this. And neither do I want any other child to live like this. Now, This was heartfelt. I felt this, Roger. I really did. And too bad I didn't have tissue here. But the fact of the matter is that you heard his story. He is one of our heroes here on this show, The Face of a Hero, because he took his time to say, I'm investing. And so should you as an educator. And so should you as a parent, to invest in your child. There are some 3-year-olds, mine were, that learned to read and write before they got to school because I invested my time in my child. Now, granted, Roger, we know that children are having children. Unfortunately, it's been like that for decades. We know more of it now because of social media, because it's more out there, because we're now more vocal about things than we were before. Back in the 80s, I knew middle schoolers, 12, 13-year-olds pregnant, having babies. Now, how are we helping them? By turning our back on those parents because they don't know any better? Because when you know better, you do better. But that's what we're doing in society. We're turning our backs on the students that have less. We're turning our backs on the parents that don't know any better, that don't speak as intellectual as you or I do. Those are the ones that are screaming help in the worst way. What do we say? Looking for love in all the wrong places.
Yeah.
And now we have children in the juvie locked up.
And if you don't connect on this an emotional level, I'll just give you some hard facts about this country. If you believe this country is worth saving, let me give you a couple of facts. I've always felt that the right for a child to read and write, comprehend and apply information was a civil rights issue of the day. I think it's the biggest civil rights issue of today. But today it's beyond a civil rights issue. Now it's become a national security threat. We've looked at the numbers. With only 1/3 of our children performing grade work level proficient grade level, we will economically collapse, and there won't be a nation. Now here, say, well, Roger, where do you come from that?
Yeah.
Where do you come from that? Well, let me give you a little some data here. When FDR was president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and developed this concept of Social Security in 1938, most people don't know do you have any idea how many full-time workers were working to support every one retiree? 160 full-time workers supporting every one retiree. Today, do you have any idea what it is today? Yeah. It's 2.9 people for every one retiree, and half of those 2.9 can't read or write. It's not economically sustainable. We're going to crash. We've got to address this issue at warp speed. At warp speed. That's how serious this is. And I, look, and I'm going to tell you, this is what I know. And I'm not going to say I'm all knowing in my knowledge, but this is what I know. It's what I've seen. If anybody has anything that's a better way that can help us save this country, because it does rely upon our most treasured assets, which are our children. I will shut my business down and come to work for you for nothing to help our children have the best opportunity to be the best they can be. That's how deeply I believe.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing your heart to move you. Thank you for allowing your past to fuel you, to saying, I'm investing whatever amount, because it's not about the money. It's not. It's about the life. It's about the value of someone's life. And in this case, we're talking about our youth. And right now, the way they are wreaking havoc, we're losing them. We're losing them daily because they don't know. They don't have the intellect, just like having sex and they're 10, 12 years old, because they don't know why they're doing what they're doing. So I'm all about solutions here. And so we have this hero that has reached out to you. He is international. His company, his nonprofit is international. But we have a diamond right now that's being offered to our Hoosiers, our educators under this grant, that you don't have to do anything other than register and want it.
Just willing to take because what this is really about at the end of the day, and I pride myself in this, it's about providing hope where there was no hope and providing opportunity where there was no opportunity.
That's right. That's right. And on that note, guys, we've extended an extra half hour because we figured his story was going to be long. Not knowing his full story, I thank you for sharing it here. I thank you for being a hero to our families, to our future families that's to come, because these children are getting educated, but they're also going to learn to learn.
That's the key thing. It's all about learning. Thank
That's
you so
it.
much for your time. And
thank you for finally saying yes to me, because we've been trying for months. Last year, actually, he came and presented to a charter school in Gary, and we're still working on that. And I hope that this story has touched you and you can relate to it and say, you know what, I'm going to step up to the plate also. I'm going to do something about it, because there's too much talking about it and not enough doing about it. So let's do something. When you see something, say something, but do something as well. With that, Roger, we got to go. I got places to go, people to see, and so do you. And hopefully you'll be fine on your way back. Travel, safe travels as well. And so thank you for tuning in here to the Face of a Hero show. And of course, you know that on Sundays we're talking about real talk, but there was a taste of some real talk here today. And I hope you felt it, and it hit you right here to say, oh, I'm part of that problem. Let me stop and let me be part of the solution.
thank you.
Awesome. You guys have a wonderful evening. Thank you for joining us here on the Face of a Hero show. Until next time, nos vemos. Peace.